Welcome back to Honor Tales, where truth always arrives at exactly the right moment, even when it feels like the worst possible time. Today's story is about a wedding day, a secret, and a woman who had to choose between the life she'd planned and the truth she couldn't ignore. Everything you're about to hear is completely original and fictional, but the feelings, those are very real. Let's begin. The flowers arrived at 6 in the morning. 200 white peonies and pale blush roses, arranged in clusters that filled the entire lobby of the Maplecroft Inn with a fragrance so thick and sweet it felt almost edible. The wedding coordinator, a sharp, efficient woman named Terry, who wore a headset even in the shower, according to her own jokes, had overseen the delivery with a clipboard and a stopwatch, confirming each arrangement against a master list she'd revised 47 times in the past 3 months. By 6:45, the ballroom was transforming. White silk chair covers, gold candle holders, a floral arch over the altar that had taken a team of 4 florists 11 hours to construct. By 7 o'clock, Corinthia Blaze was sitting in a cushioned chair in the bridal suite on the 3rd floor, watching a woman she'd known for 15 years carefully paint her fingernails the color of fresh cream, and trying very hard to feel what she was supposed to feel. Joy, anticipation, the giddy, chest-expanding certainty that today was the beginning of everything. She felt those things. She did. They were real. But underneath them, like a frequency you can't quite hear but sense in your back teeth, was something else. Something small and persistent that she hadn't been able to name in the 3 weeks since she'd noticed it. A hesitation. Not about the wedding, not about the man, about something she couldn't locate, like a word that sits at the tip of your tongue and refuses to surface. Her name, Corinthia, was her grandmother's invention, pulled from a letter written in 1943 by a great-uncle who had studied antiquities and had a weakness for unusual vowel combinations. Everyone called her Cori. She was 31, a landscape architect who designed urban green spaces for mid-sized American cities, and she had the particular kind of quiet confidence that comes not from arrogance, but from years of being underestimated and then proving people wrong. She had dark brown skin, natural hair she was wearing up today in an elaborate braided style her sister had spent 6 hours constructing the night before, and eyes that people consistently described, somewhat helplessly, as the kind that make you feel like you've been read. She was marrying Daniel Ashford, 34, a commercial real estate attorney from a family that had lived in Crestwood Falls, Tennessee, for 4 generations. Crestwood Falls was the kind of fictional small city that existed in that specific American middle space, too large to be a small town, too modest to be a real city, with a downtown of red brick buildings and a riverwalk that had been renovated twice in the past decade, and a high school football team that people cared about with an intensity that outsiders found baffling. Daniel had grown up here. Cori had arrived 6 years ago for a park redesign project, stayed for Daniel, and slowly made Crestwood Falls her own. The way you make a sweater that belongs to someone else your own, by wearing it long enough that it takes your shape. The engagement had been 2 years long. The planning had consumed the last 14 months. The guest list was 212 people. The cake had been tasted 11 times. Everything was ready. At 8:15, her maid of honor, her younger sister Jada, came into the suite carrying a coffee cup and a phone charger, and wearing the particular expression of a person managing several anxieties simultaneously. "How are you doing?" Jada asked. "Good," Cori said. "Really good." Jada looked at her for a long, careful moment. Jada was 28 and had known Cori her entire life, which meant she was arguably the world's foremost expert on the difference between her sister being fine and her sister saying she was fine. Okay, Jada said, in a tone that meant the conversation wasn't over. It wasn't. At 9 o'clock, Cori was alone in the suite for 12 minutes. Jada had gone to collect the bridesmaids, the nail technician had finished, the hairstylist was taking a break, and her phone, sitting on the vanity table, buzzed with a notification. She glanced at it reflexively, the automatic response of a generation raised on immediate information. It was a message in the group chat she shared with Daniel and their mutual friend Marcus, who was Daniel's best man. The chat was called Wedding Weekend and had been used for the past 72 hours to coordinate logistics. Who was picking up Daniel's parents from the airport? What time the rehearsal dinner had started? Whether Marcus had remembered the rings? The message that appeared was not about any of those things. It was from Marcus, and it was clear, immediately, that it had been sent to the wrong chat. Bro, relax. Cori doesn't know anything about Charleston, and she's never going to. Just get through today and you can figure out the rest after. She loves you, man. Don't blow this up over guilt. Cori read it twice. Then she sat very still for approximately 45 seconds. The room was full of the smell of flowers and hairspray and the distant sound of the string quartet warming up 3 floors below. Outside the window, Crestwood Falls was having the exact June morning the weather app had promised. Clear sky, 71 degrees. The kind of light that makes everything look slightly more beautiful than it actually is. A perfect wedding day, by any objective measure. She picked up the phone. She opened the chat. She looked at the message again, making sure she had read it correctly. She had. She set the phone down. She stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the Riverwalk and the old brick storefronts and the little park she had actually redesigned 3 years ago. The one with the curved benches and the native wildflower beds that bloomed every May without fail. She had done that. She had put those flowers there. She had built something in this city that would outlast any single day. She thought about Charleston. She and Daniel had never been to Charleston together. She had gone once for a conference, alone, 18 months ago. She had told Daniel about the trip. He had seemed barely interested, which she'd attributed to a stressful work period and thought nothing of. Cori doesn't know anything about Charleston. There were a limited number of things that sentence could mean. She was, by professional training, a person who assessed situations clearly and built plans accordingly. She did not panic. She did not catastrophize. But she also did not pretend, even on her wedding day, that words meant something other than what they said. She called Daniel. He picked up on the second ring, his voice warm and slightly nervous in the way it always was on days that mattered. Hey, you're not supposed to call me. It's bad luck. What happened in Charleston? She said. The pause that followed was 3 seconds long. 3 seconds is not a long time in most circumstances. In this one, it was long enough. Cori, Daniel, what happened in Charleston? It was not a question anymore. He told her. Not immediately. There was another pause, and she could hear him move to somewhere private. A door closing, the ambient sound of the hotel room changing. And then, in a voice that was careful and quiet, and had the particular texture of something that had been rehearsed internally many times, and was now being said aloud for the first time, he told her. 8 months ago, a work trip. A woman named Sloan, who was a colleague from his firm's Nashville office. 2 nights. It had ended, he said this quickly, as if speed would soften it. It had ended the moment he came home. He had told Marcus because Marcus had noticed something was wrong and pushed until he told him. He had not told Cori because he didn't know how, and then because he convinced himself she didn't need to know. And then because the wedding was too close. And then because he loved her, which he said 3 times in the space of 40 seconds in a way that suggested he understood, even as he said it, that love and honesty are not the same thing and cannot substitute for each other. He stopped speaking. She said nothing. After a long moment, "Cori, I am so sorry. Please, tell me what to do." She looked at herself in the mirror across the room. The dress was ivory silk with a subtle champagne undertone that her mother had cried about in the fitting room. The hair was beautiful. The flowers downstairs were beautiful. 212 people were arriving, or had arrived, taking their seats on white-covered chairs, reading programs printed on heavy cream cardstock with gold foil lettering. "I need an hour," she said. "Don't come to this floor. Don't send anyone up here." "Cori." "An hour, Daniel." She hung up. She sat on the edge of the bed, carefully, so as not to crush the dress, and she thought. Not emotionally, practically. She was a woman who had designed a park that needed to account for drainage, sun angles, soil composition, foot traffic patterns, and a city council with 17 competing opinions. She knew how to hold complexity without flinching from it. Here was what she knew. She loved Daniel. That was real. It was not a small thing, and she would not pretend it was. 6 years of knowing someone, of building a life alongside them, of choosing them every morning in the small ways that constitute actual love rather than its performance. That was not nothing. That would not be nothing tomorrow or the day after. Here was also what she knew. He had looked at her for 8 months, knowing what he had done, and had said nothing. Had smiled at her across dinner tables, had kissed her goodnight, had sat beside her in the cake tasting and the florist and the final venue walkthrough, choosing between options for a future he was decorating with a secret at its foundation. She thought about her grandmother, who had been married for 51 years to a man everyone in the family agreed was not easy, who had once told Cori, over the kind of conversation that only happens between women 3 generations apart, "Baby, you can forgive almost anything, but you can't build something lasting on a lie. The foundation has to be true, or nothing on top of it will stand." Her grandmother had been a landscape architect before Cori had a name for it. A woman who grew things and understood soil, who knew that what's underground determines what's above. In year 7, something shifted in Cori's thinking. She was not a woman who confused forgiveness with foolishness. She was not a woman who confused love with surrender. And she was not, under any circumstances, a woman who would begin the most important chapter of her life with a lie already written into the first page. At 9:52, Cori called Jada. "I need you to come up here. Just you." Jada arrived in 4 minutes, took one look at her sister's face, closed the door, and sat down. She did not say anything. She had always known when to be quiet. Cori told her everything. Calmly, completely. The way she would have delivered a project assessment. Jada listened without interrupting, which cost her something. Her jaw tightened twice, and her eyes went sharp in the way they did when she was controlling a response that wanted to be much louder than the situation required. When Cori finished, Jada said, "What do you want to do?" "I don't know yet," Cori said, "but I know what I'm not going to do." She was not going to walk down that aisle with this information sitting in her chest like a stone, unaddressed. She was not going to start a marriage, if there was still going to be a marriage, the way it had been living for the past 8 months, with something important buried underneath it. She asked Jada to go downstairs and ask the coordinator to hold, not cancel, hold, and to please keep the guests seated and comfortable. Then she called the one person she hadn't called yet. She called Daniel back, and she asked him to come to the suite. Just him. No Marcus, no parents, just the two of them, in a room full of 200 white peonies worth of fragrance, drifting up from the floor below. In a city she had built something in, on the morning of their wedding. He arrived in 8 minutes, still in his suit, his face the color of a person who has stopped pretending everything is fine, and is now simply present in whatever this is. He stood in the doorway and looked at her, at the dress, the hair, the expression she was wearing that he'd never seen before, which was the expression of someone who has decided they will be entirely honest regardless of what it costs. "Sit down," she said. "We're going to talk. Really talk. And then I'm going to decide." He sat. He did not argue. He did not perform remorse or manufacture urgency. He sat down in a chair in the bridal suite of the Maplecroft Inn with his hands folded in his lap, and he looked at her, and he was, for the first time in 8 months, entirely without defense. They talked for 55 minutes. He answered every question she asked. He did not flinch from any of them. He cried, twice, not dramatically, but quietly, in the way men cry when they have run out of the energy to hold it back. She did not cry. She had learned, a long time ago, that her clearest thinking happened in the moments when other people expected her to fall apart, and she chose instead to stay steady. She asked him why he hadn't told her. He said he was afraid of losing her. She asked him what he thought hiding it would cost. Not him, but her. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Everything. It would cost you everything. Because you deserve the truth, and I took it from you, and I have no excuse for that." She believed him. That was the complicated part. She believed the remorse was real, the same way she believed the love was real. And she understood that none of those things negated the other ones. Real love and real betrayal can exist in the same person. Real remorse and real consequences can coexist. Life does not resolve into clean categories, no matter how much you want it to. At 10:55, Corinthia Blaze made her decision. She stood up. She smoothed her dress. She looked at Daniel for a long moment. "Here's what's going to happen," she said. "We're going to go downstairs. I am going to address our guests, briefly and honestly, without humiliating you publicly, because that's not who I am. We are going to postpone this wedding. Not cancel, postpone." She watched his face. "And then we are going to spend the next several months in real, honest counseling. Not to save a wedding date, but to find out whether what we have is actually what I need it to be. Whether you are actually who I need you to be. whether we are something that can be rebuilt on honest ground. And if it can, Daniel said. Then we'll talk about a new date, she said. And the foundation will be true this time. Every brick. He nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't ask for more than she was offering. They walked downstairs together, not holding hands, not performing normalcy, and entered the ballroom where 212 people fell into a sudden, surprised silence. Terry, the coordinator, to her eternal credit, simply stood to the side and let it unfold. Cori stood at the front of the room, not at the altar, but in the open space before it, and she spoke clearly and without notes. "Thank you all for being here," she said. "I mean that more than you know. This day is not going to happen today. I'll spare you the details. They're private, and privacy matters. What I will tell you is this. I am choosing honesty over performance. And I'm choosing it because it's the only thing worth choosing, even when, especially when, it's hard." She paused. "Please enjoy the meal, the flowers, the music. All of it was made with love and care, and I don't want any of it wasted." A small, real smile. "I'll see you at the next one, if there is one, on solid ground." She walked out of the ballroom, through the lobby, past the 200 white peonies, and out into the June morning of Crestwood Falls, Tennessee, where the wildflowers she had planted 3 years ago were in full bloom in the little park by the river, reaching toward the light the way things do when their roots are strong enough. She sat on one of the curved benches she had designed herself, in a dress that cost $3,000, and she breathed the clean morning air of a city that felt, in this moment, entirely and completely hers. Jada came out 10 minutes later and sat beside her without being asked. They didn't talk for a while. The river moved. The flowers moved. The city went on with its Saturday the way cities do, indifferent and beautiful. "You okay?" Jada finally said. "Not entirely," Cori said. "But I will be." That was the truth, the whole of it, without decoration. In Crestwood Falls, Tennessee, on a June morning that had looked like a perfect wedding day from the outside, Corinthia Blaze chose something harder than a beautiful ceremony and more lasting than any single day. She chose the ground. And things that grow in honest ground, as any landscape architect will tell you, tend to outlast almost everything else. She didn't walk away from love. She walked toward honesty. And that took more courage than any vow ever could. This has been an Honor Tales original story. If this resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe. Honor Tales, where truth always finds a way. We'll see you in the next story.